Commander Zara Okafor stood on the bridge of the UES Pathfinder, watching the stars shift and dance through the main viewing screen. After 3 years of faster-than-light travel, her crew had finally reached the edge of known space. At least, what humans thought was known space. "Ma'am, we're picking up some strange signals ahead," reported Lieutenant Kim from the communications station. She looked puzzled as she adjusted her headset. "They're not natural. Definitely artificial. But the pattern is like nothing in our databases." Zara moved closer to Kim's station. "Can you decode them?" "Working on it, but it's complicated. The signals are old, really old. And they're coming from everywhere around us, like we're flying into some kind of invisible net." Dr. Sarah Chen looked up from her science station. As the ship's quantum physicist, she had been studying the strange energy readings they had detected for the past week. "Commander, I think these signals are warning beacons. They're telling us to stay away from something." "Stay away from what?" Zara asked. Sarah pointed at her screen, which showed a detailed map of the area ahead. "That solar system, the one with the yellow star that looks exactly like our sun." Zara felt a chill run down her spine. The star system ahead did look familiar. Too familiar. "Are you saying that's the Sol system? Our home?" "The readings match perfectly," Sarah said quietly. "But according to these warning signals, our home system is surrounded by some kind of quarantine zone. Someone doesn't want anyone to go there." Far away, in a crystal city floating among the stars, alarms began to ring. The Zephyrian monitoring station had detected something impossible. A ship was approaching the forbidden zone from the inside. From the quarantine zone itself, Captain Theros, a being made of living crystal that changed colors with his emotions, turned bright red with alarm. "Check the readings again," he ordered his crew. "Nothing lives in the Sol system. Nothing can live there." His science officer, a younger Zephyrian who sparkled blue with nervousness, double-checked the instruments. "The readings are correct, Captain. A ship has emerged from the forbidden zone. It carries the genetic markers of the extinct race." Theros turned deep purple with fear. "Impossible. The architects have been gone for 30,000 years. Their world was sealed away to protect the galaxy. Should we contact the Confederation Council?" Theros was already reaching for the emergency communication device. "Send a priority alert to all 5 ruling powers. Tell them the impossible has happened. The children of the architects have awakened." Back on the Pathfinder, engineer Marcus Rodriguez was having trouble sleeping. For the past few days, he had been having strange dreams about machines and technology he had never seen before. In his dreams, he could fix anything just by touching it and thinking about how it should work. "Just stress," he told himself as he made his way to the engine room for his night shift. "First, deep space mission, weird alien signals. It's enough to give anyone bad dreams." But when he reached the engine room, he found something that made him question his sanity. The ship's main quantum drive, which had been making worrying sounds for weeks, was running perfectly. All the warning lights that had been flashing red for days were now green. Marcus ran a full diagnostic, but everything checked out. The engine was working better than it had since they left Earth, but no one had repaired it. No one had even been in the engine room since yesterday. "That's impossible," he whispered to himself. "Machines don't fix themselves." In her small laboratory, Dr. Yuki Tanaka was also having a strange night. She had been studying samples of space dust collected during their journey. But something weird was happening to her specimens. Every time she looked at them under her microscope, they seemed to change. At first, she thought her equipment was broken. But after checking everything twice, she had to accept that the samples were actually changing their molecular structure while she watched. It was as if they were responding to her thoughts about what she wanted to see. "This breaks every law of physics I know," she said to her research notes. "Matter doesn't reorganize itself just because someone thinks about it." But deep down, Yuki felt like she had always known this was possible. Like she was remembering something she had forgotten long ago. Meanwhile, 7-year-old Emma Martinez was fast asleep in her bed on Earth, but her dreams were filled with stars and strange alien cities. In her dream, she could hear voices calling to her from far away. They sounded scared and worried, and they were talking about her planet. Emma had always been a smart child, but lately, Her parents had noticed she could do things that seemed impossible. Yesterday, she had been playing with her toy blocks, and when she got frustrated that they wouldn't stack the way she wanted, they had suddenly moved by themselves to form the perfect tower she had imagined. Her mother thought it was just tricks and coincidence. Her father worried it might be something more. As Emma slept, her mind reached out across space without her knowing it. She touched the dreams of every human on the ship, sharing with them feelings and memories that didn't belong to her. She showed them visions of vast cosmic structures and impossible technologies, of a time when their ancestors had been something far more than human. On the Pathfinder, Commander Okafor woke up gasping. She had been dreaming about flying through space without a ship, creating stars with her bare hands, and building worlds just by thinking about them. But the strangest part was that the dreams felt like memories. All across the ship, the crew was waking up with the same confused feeling. They had all shared the same impossible dreams, dreams that felt more real than their waking lives. In the Crystal City, Captain Theros received an emergency message from the Confederation Council. 5 ancient races had ruled the galaxy for 50,000 years, and now they were all terrified by the same thing: a small blue planet that they had hoped would stay hidden forever. The message was simple and direct. Monitor the situation. Do not engage. If the descendants of the architects have truly awakened, then everything we know about reality is about to change. Theros looked out at the stars and wondered if this was the beginning of the end of everything, or the start of something entirely new. Either way, he knew that the galaxy would never be the same again. The children of the architects were starting to remember who they really were. 3 days after the strange dreams began, the Pathfinder's sensors detected something that changed everything. Another ship was approaching from the outer edge of the warning beacon network. "Commander, we have contact," Lieutenant Kim announced, her voice tight with excitement and fear. "It's definitely artificial, but the design is unlike anything we've ever seen. It looks like it's made of living crystal." Zara moved to the main viewer and watched as the alien vessel came into view. The ship was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. It seemed to grow and shift like a living thing, its crystal surface reflecting light in patterns that hurt to look at directly. "Are they trying to communicate?" Zara asked. "Yes, ma'am. Multiple frequencies, complex mathematical patterns. Dr. Chen thinks she can decode some of it." Sarah looked up from her station, her face pale. "Commander, they're not trying to say hello. They're trying to warn us away. The message keeps repeating the same thing. Turn back, children of the forbidden world. Turn back before it's too late." On the crystal ship, Captain Theros was fighting every instinct that told him to run. His orders were clear. Make contact, assess the threat, and report back to the Council. But every part of his being screamed that he was making a terrible mistake. "Open a communication channel," he ordered, his crystalline body flashing orange with anxiety. "But keep the reality anchors ready. If they show any sign of architect abilities, we retreat immediately." The first exchange was careful and formal. Theros introduced himself as a representative of the Galactic Confederation, while Zara explained that humans were explorers from the 3rd planet of the Sol system. Both sides were polite. Both sides were terrified. Then Dr. Chen made a mistake that changed everything. She had been studying the alien communication patterns, trying to understand how their technology worked. Without thinking, she reached out with her mind, the same way she had been unconsciously reaching out to fix problems around the ship. The moment her consciousness touched the Zephyrian ship's crystal matrix, everything went wrong. Sarah suddenly found herself inside the alien vessel's computer system. She could see through its sensors, access its memory banks, and understand its technology as if she had built it herself. But more than that, she could feel Captain Theros's mind, his memories, his absolute terror at what she was doing. Through his memories, she saw the truth about Earth, about humans, about why their home system was surrounded by warning beacons. The connection lasted only seconds before Theros managed to cut it. But it was too late. Sarah had seen everything. And through her, every human on the Pathfinder had felt the touch of something impossible. "Emergency retreat," Theros shouted to his crew. All power to engines. Send immediate alert to the Council. The Architect's bloodline has awakened. Repeat. They have awakened. The crystal ship disappeared in a flash of light, leaving the human crew staring at empty space. Sarah Chen sat at her station, shaking uncontrollably. The visions from the aliens' memories played over and over in her mind. She had seen images of humans, but not humans. As they were now, beings of incredible power who could reshape reality with a thought, who had once built impossible structures across the galaxy. She had seen the war that destroyed them, the civil conflict that nearly collapsed the universe itself, and she had seen the aftermath, when the survivors chose to hide their children on a small blue world and let them forget what they really were. Dr. Chen, are you all right? Commander Okafor asked, but she already knew the answer. The same memories, weaker but still clear, were flowing through her own mind. We're not what we think we are, Sarah whispered. We're the descendants of something ancient and powerful. Something so dangerous that entire civilizations still have nightmares about us. Across the galaxy, the emergency session of the Confederation Council had begun. Representatives of the 5 ruling species gathered in their great chamber. A space station larger than most planets. They had not all met like this for over 10,000 years. The luminals, beings of pure energy, flickered with distress as they spoke. The reports from the monitoring station are confirmed. The quarantine has been breached from within. The genetic scans are positive for architect heritage. The collective, a hive mind species that spoke with 1,000 voices, responded with barely controlled panic. This cannot be allowed. The architects nearly destroyed everything. Their children must be contained before they remember what they are. But it was too late for containment. Back on Earth, the awakening had already begun. Emma Martinez woke up screaming. Her parents rushed to her room to find their 7-year-old daughter floating 3 feet above her bed, surrounded by toys that were dancing in the air around her. When they tried to reach for her, their hands passed through her body as if she was made of light. Emma, honey, come down, her mother pleaded. But Emma couldn't hear her. The little girl was lost in visions of distant stars and alien civilizations, all of them afraid of her world. Similar incidents were happening all across Earth. In Tokyo, a businessman accidentally walked through a solid wall when he was late for a meeting. In London, a teacher discovered she could read her students' minds. In New York, a child with autism suddenly began speaking in languages that didn't exist, describing mathematical concepts that would have impressed university professors. The awakening wasn't random. It was spreading through genetic lines, activating dormant abilities that had been sleeping in human DNA for thousands of generations. And each new awakening made the next one stronger. Dr. Marcus Rodriguez called Commander Okafor from the engine room, his voice shaking. Commander, you need to see this. The quantum drive isn't just running better. It's evolving. The machinery is changing itself, becoming something more advanced than anything humans have ever built. When Zara arrived at the engine room, she found Marcus standing in front of a machine that barely resembled the quantum drive they had started their journey with. The new device was elegant and beautiful, humming with power that felt alive. I didn't do anything to it, Marcus said. I just wanted it to work better. And it heard me somehow. It understood what I needed and changed itself to give it to me. Dr. Tanaka reported similar changes in her laboratory. Her research equipment had transformed overnight, becoming tools that could analyze matter at levels that should have been impossible. But she understood how to use them, as if the knowledge had always been inside her waiting to wake up. On the bridge, Lieutenant Kim was receiving reports from Earth that made no sense. Communications networks were reporting impossible events happening worldwide. People were developing abilities that violated every law of physics, and somehow, they all seemed to know instinctively how to use them. Commander, Kim said quietly, I think we're receiving these reports through quantum entanglement. But that's impossible over these distances. Unless we're not using technology to communicate, Zara finished. Unless we're doing it with our minds. As if to confirm her words, Zara suddenly felt the presence of every human on Earth in her thoughts. 7 billion minds, all beginning to wake up to their true nature. She could feel their confusion, their fear, and underneath it all, their incredible potential. In the council chamber, the ancient rulers of the galaxy watched the reports with growing terror. The humans weren't just developing individual abilities. They were forming a collective consciousness that spanned their entire species. Soon, they would remember everything their ancestors had been capable of. "Prepare the existence engine," commanded the eldest of the Synth-Arcs, machine beings who had ruled for longer than most species had existed. "If we cannot contain them, we must erase them from the timeline before they destroy everything." The weapon they spoke of had never been used. It was designed to edit reality itself, to remove entire civilizations from history, as if they had never existed. But the council was desperate enough to risk anything to stop the architect's children from remembering their full power. They did not realize that their decision had already been sensed by the awakening humans, or that preparing to destroy Earth would trigger the very response they were trying to prevent. The diplomatic fleet that approached Earth 3 weeks later was the largest force ever assembled in galactic history. 200 ships from all 5 ruling species, their hulls gleaming with weapons designed to fight beings who could bend reality with their thoughts. Ambassador Zelnara of the Ethereals stood at the command center of the flagship, her translucent form flickering with nervous energy. As a being of pure thought, she was the most qualified to deal with mental powers, but even she feared what they might face on the human homeworld. "Remember," she told her staff, "we are here officially as peaceful ambassadors making first contact. The humans must not know our true purpose until it's too late." Her aide, a younger ethereal named Keth Moore, pulsed with uncertainty. "What if they can read our intentions? The reports from the monitoring station suggest they have powerful telepathic abilities." "That's why we have the mind shields," Exelnara replied, touching the metal device attached to her ethereal form. "These dampeners will hide our thoughts from even architect-level telepaths. The humans will never know what we're really planning." On Earth, the changes were becoming impossible to hide. News networks struggled to report events that made no sense. A construction worker in Brazil had accidentally turned a pile of concrete into a perfect sculpture just by imagining what he wanted to build. A farmer in India had somehow made his crops grow to maturity in a single day. A child in Australia had drawn a picture of a flower, and the drawing had grown into a real plant right on the paper. World leaders gathered in emergency sessions, trying to understand what was happening to their people. Scientists worked around the clock to study the phenomenon, but their instruments could barely measure what they were seeing. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the world's leading expert on genetics, stood before the United Nations Security Council with findings that challenged everything humanity thought it knew about itself. "The genetic analysis is conclusive," she said, her voice shaking. "These abilities aren't mutations or external influences. They're natural human traits that have been dormant for thousands of generations. It's as if our entire species was designed to be capable of these things, but something was keeping us from accessing our full potential." "Are you saying this is evolution?" asked the Secretary General. "No," Elena replied. "This is remembering. Our DNA contains information that's far older than human civilization. We're not becoming something new. We're becoming what we were always meant to be." Emma Martinez had become the center of a worldwide phenomenon. The 7-year-old girl was now in constant telepathic contact with awakened humans across the planet, serving as a kind of living communication network. She could no longer speak normally, instead communicating through thoughts that could be heard by anyone with awakened abilities. Her parents, who had initially been terrified by their daughter's transformation, now found themselves serving as her guardians and interpreters. Through Emma, they learned that the human awakening was not random or accidental. "She says we're being called," Emma's mother explained to the government officials who had come to study her daughter. "Something out there is afraid of us, and that fear is waking us up, like our minds are responding to a threat we don't even know about yet." On the Pathfinder, the crew had become something beyond human. Dr. Chen could now perceive multiple dimensions simultaneously, understanding the fundamental structure of space and time in ways that would have driven her insane just weeks earlier. Engineer Rodriguez had merged with the ship's systems so completely that he no longer needed to physically touch anything to control it. The entire vessel had become an extension of his will. Commander Okafor found herself serving as a bridge between her transformed crew and the awakening population of Earth. Through her connection to Emma and the other awakened humans, she could feel the approach of the alien fleet long before their sensors detected it. "They're coming," she announced to her crew. 200 ships, armed with weapons we've never seen before. But they're not coming to welcome us to the galactic community. They're coming to evaluate whether we need to be destroyed. Dr. Tanaka looked up from her transformed laboratory, where she had been studying the quantum structure of matter itself. "Can you sense their intentions?" "Some of them," Zara replied. "Their minds are shielded. But the shields aren't perfect. They're afraid of us. They think we're the children of something they call the architects, beings who nearly destroyed the universe a long time ago." Marcus Rodriguez spoke from everywhere and nowhere at once, his consciousness now distributed throughout the ship's systems. The ship's archives are accessing information that shouldn't exist, historical records of the architects, stored in our own quantum drives. The data says we're not just their descendants. We're their backup plan. The information that flowed through the ship's enhanced systems told a story that reframed everything humans thought they knew about themselves. 30,000 years ago, the architects had been the most advanced civilization in the universe. They could manipulate matter, energy, space, and time with the power of thought alone. They had built wonders that spanned galaxies and created technologies that operated on principles beyond current understanding. But their power had also been their downfall. A civil war had broken out between those who wanted to reshape the universe according to their vision, and those who believed in allowing other species to develop naturally. The conflict had nearly torn reality apart. In the end, the surviving architects had made a desperate choice. They scattered their genetic legacy across many worlds, hoping that their descendants would eventually awaken to their heritage, but with the wisdom to use their power responsibly. Earth had been one of many seed worlds, but it was the only one that had survived the passage of time. "We're not just humans," Sarah Chen said as she processed the flood of recovered information. "We're the children of gods who chose to become mortal so we could learn to be better than they were." The alien fleet arrived in Earth orbit on a Tuesday morning, their ships visible to the naked eye as points of light that moved against the natural pattern of the stars. The official first contact ceremony was broadcast worldwide, with Ambassador Zelnara appearing before the United Nations as a shimmering figure of light and thought. "People of Earth," she said, her voice translated into every human language simultaneously. "We welcome you to the galactic community. We come in peace to learn about your species and to offer friendship between our peoples." But Emma Martinez, watching the broadcast from her home, suddenly screamed in terror. Her psychic abilities, now stronger than ever, had pierced through the ambassador's mental shields and seen the truth. Through Emma's connection, every awakened human on Earth felt it at the same moment. The alien fleet wasn't here to welcome them. Hidden beneath the diplomatic ship was a weapon capable of erasing Earth from existence, and the aliens were preparing to use it. The betrayal triggered something primal in the human collective consciousness. For the first time since the awakening began, the scattered abilities of individual humans began to merge into something greater. Emma became the focal point of a psychic network that connected every person on the planet, allowing them to share knowledge, abilities, and intentions instantaneously. Ambassador Zelnara staggered backward as 7 billion human minds turned their attention toward her at once. Her psychic shields, designed to hide thoughts from individuals, were overwhelmed by the sheer scale of the collective mental force focused on her. "They know," she whispered to her staff, her ethereal form flickering with panic. "They've seen our true purpose. The mind shields are useless against this level of collective psychic power." On Earth, the awakened humans began to act with unified purpose. Those with matter manipulation abilities started building defenses that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Others with time perception began to slow down the moments around them, giving their species more time to prepare. The most powerful began reaching out toward the alien fleet, not with aggression, but with a desperate need to understand why they were being threatened. The connection, when it came, was overwhelming for both sides. The aliens experienced the full force of human confusion, fear, and innocent desire to protect their world. The humans felt the deep terror that had driven 5 ancient civilizations to the brink of genocide. In that moment of shared consciousness, both species realized they had misunderstood each other completely. The humans weren't preparing to conquer the galaxy. They didn't even fully understand what they were capable of. They were children with godlike power, terrified and confused by their own abilities. But the aliens' fear ran too deep for easy understanding to fix. The orders had already been given, and the existence engine was charging up to fire. The weapon that could erase civilizations from history itself was about to target Earth, and the awakening humans would have to make a choice: submit to destruction or fight back with power they didn't yet know how to control. Either way, the universe was about to change forever. The existence engine powered up with a sound that reality itself seemed to fear. Deep in the heart of the alien fleet's command vessel, a weapon that had never been fired before began to charge with energy drawn from the quantum foam that underlies all existence. "Final authorization confirmed," announced the Synth Admiral, its mechanical voice showing no emotion as it prepared to erase an entire species from history. "Target, Sol 3, designation Earth. Preparing temporal erasure protocol." Ambassador Zelnara floated near the weapon controls, her ethereal form dim with conflicted thoughts. The human minds she had touched were innocent, confused, desperate to understand why they were being threatened, but her fear of what they might become overrode her growing doubts. "The weapon will remove them retroactively," she told herself. "They will never have existed. There will be no suffering, no death. They simply will not be." But 40,000 kilometers away, Dr. Sarah Chen felt the buildup of temporal energy like a knife against her consciousness. Through the collective human network, every awakened person on Earth sensed the gathering storm of a weapon designed to unmake their entire timeline. "They're going to erase us," Sarah announced to her crewmates on the Pathfinder. "Not kill us. Make it so we never existed in the first place." The response was immediate and instinctive. 7 billion humans, connected through Emma Martinez's psychic network, reached out simultaneously to protect their world. They didn't know what they were doing or how their power worked, but survival instinct guided them to pool their abilities into something greater than the sum of its parts. Sarah became the focal point of this desperate defense. Her understanding of quantum mechanics, enhanced by her awakened abilities, allowed her to perceive the structure of the weapon's attack. Without thinking, she reached out with her consciousness to deflect the temporal beam. The moment the existence engine fired, Sarah wrapped Earth in a bubble of quantum uncertainty, a shell of probability that would make the planet impossible to target precisely. The temporal erasure beam, designed to unravel a single timeline, instead struck a target that existed in multiple realities simultaneously. The feedback was catastrophic. Instead of erasing Earth, the weapon created a cascading failure in the local structure of space-time. The beam reflected back on itself, amplified by Sarah's desperate defense, and began spreading outward in all directions. Stars that had shone for billions of years began aging millions of years in minutes. Planets spun backward in their orbits as time itself became unstable. The laws of physics, which had seemed absolute and unchanging, started to become negotiable in scattered regions throughout the solar system. "What have we done?" whispered the Synth Admiral as its sensors detected the growing chaos. "The weapon has malfunctioned. Reality itself is coming apart." On Earth, the effects were even more dramatic. Emma Martinez, still serving as the hub of human collective consciousness, found herself at the center of a growing storm of possibility. The child's innocent mind, overwhelmed by power she couldn't comprehend, began unconsciously reshaping the world around her. Her drawings came to life, stepping off the paper as real creatures made of hope and imagination. Her toys grew to enormous size and began walking through the streets, confused but harmless giants trying to understand what they were supposed to do. In her bedroom, physics obeyed the logic of fairy tales instead of scientific law. But Emma wasn't the only one whose abilities had spiraled beyond control. Across the planet, humans were accidentally reshaping reality in response to their emotions and subconscious desires. James Crawford, a corporate executive in New York, had always dreamed of power and wealth. When his abilities awakened fully in response to the crisis, his desires began manifesting in dangerous ways. The The building he worked in started growing like a living thing, consuming other structures to feed its expansion. His bank accounts multiplied not through theft but through sheer force of will that convinced reality his money had always existed. In contrast, Dr. Maria Santos, a pediatric nurse in Sao Paulo, found her healing abilities expanding beyond anything she had imagined. She could cure diseases with a touch, but her overwhelming desire to help everyone at once began creating strange ripples in biological reality. Plants grew stronger and healthier for miles around her hospital. Animals lost their fear of humans and began gathering peacefully in the streets. The most terrifying changes were happening to those who didn't understand what was occurring. A construction worker in Mumbai, trying to fix a collapsed building, accidentally turned the rubble into a structure that existed in 7 dimensions simultaneously. A teacher in Berlin, frustrated with her students' inability to learn, unconsciously enhanced their intelligence until they began speaking in mathematical equations that described the fundamental nature of consciousness itself. Commander Okafor watched the chaos spreading across Earth through the Pathfinder's enhanced sensors. "We have to do something," she told her crew. "People are reshaping reality without knowing how to control it. At this rate, Earth won't exist in any recognizable form within hours." Marcus Rodriguez, his consciousness now spanning multiple dimensions, was trying to understand the scope of the disaster. "It's not just Earth," he reported. "The reality failure is spreading through the entire solar system. Mars has 2 moons now, and they're both singing. Jupiter's storms have become conscious and are trying to communicate with us." Dr. Tanaka was studying readings that made no scientific sense. The laws of physics are becoming flexible within the affected area. Gravity is optional in some places. Light is moving at different speeds depending on who's looking at it. And time is flowing in spirals instead of straight lines. But the strangest development was happening in the quantum substrate beneath normal reality. The massive release of architect-level power was calling to something that had been sleeping for 30,000 years. Deep in the fabric of space-time itself, the consciousness of the original architects began to stir. They had fragmented themselves across countless generations, hoping their descendants would find a better way to use their power. But the desperate cries of their children in danger was drawing their scattered essence back together. Sarah Chen was the first to sense their awakening. As she struggled to contain the reality storm her defensive action had created, she felt ancient minds touching hers, beings of incredible power and wisdom, carrying the weight of eons of regret and hope. "We hear you, child," came a voice that seemed to speak from the beginning of time itself. "We feel your fear and confusion. You are trying to protect your people, but you do not yet understand what you are." "What are we?" Sarah asked through the collective human consciousness. "What were you trying to make us become?" "Well, better than we were," the architect presence replied. "We had power without wisdom, strength without restraint. Our civil war nearly destroyed everything that exists. We chose to scatter ourselves, to become mortal and vulnerable, so that our children might learn what we never could. That true power comes not from the ability to reshape reality, but from knowing when not to use that ability." The original architects had been watching through their descendants' eyes, experiencing mortality and limitation through countless generations of human lives. They had felt every joy and sorrow, every moment of compassion and growth that their children had experienced. Through this long journey, they had finally learned the wisdom that had escaped them in their first existence. "The other species fear you because they remember us," the ancestral voice continued. "They believe you will repeat our mistakes. But we have seen through your lives that you have learned what we could not. Empathy, restraint, the value of life, even when it is fragile and brief." As the architect consciousness fully awakened, the reality storm began to stabilize. The ancient beings guided their descendants, showing them how to repair the damage they had inadvertently caused. Stars resumed their normal aging process. Planets returned to stable orbits. The laws of physics reasserted themselves, but with subtle differences that reflected humanity's new understanding of reality's true nature. On Earth, Emma Martinez felt the presence of her ancient ancestors like a warm embrace. The chaos around her calmed as she learned to control her abilities with the wisdom of beings who had lived for millions of years. Her living drawings became beautiful artwork that brought joy without disrupting reality. Her toys returned to normal size but retained a spark of consciousness that made them perfect companions for children who needed comfort. James Crawford found his selfish desires transforming under the influence of ancestral wisdom. His growing building stopped consuming other structures and instead became a marvel of architecture that seemed to exist in harmony with its surroundings. His wealth remained, but he felt an overwhelming urge to use it to help others, rather than accumulate more power. Dr. Santos discovered that her healing abilities had become even more effective, but now she understood how to help people without overwhelming the natural order. Her presence continued to bring health and peace, but in ways that strengthened rather than disrupted the world around her. But the awakening of the architects had been sensed throughout the galaxy. The 5 ruling species watched in terror as energy signatures they had hoped never to see again began emanating from the Sol system. The beings who had once nearly destroyed the universe were returning. What they didn't yet understand was that these were not the same architects who had fought the ancient war. These were beings who had learned compassion through mortality, wisdom through limitation, and love through vulnerability. The universe was about to meet the architects reborn, and nothing would ever be the same. Ambassador Zelnara felt the moment when everything changed. The connection that had been forced upon her by Emma Martinez's psychic touch hadn't been severed when the human child learned to control her abilities. Instead, it had become a permanent bridge between species, allowing the ethereal diplomat to experience human thoughts and emotions as if they were her own. Through this link, she felt the awakening of the architect consciousness, but she also felt something the ancient records had never mentioned: love. The returning architects weren't the cold, power-hungry beings of legend. They were parents reuniting with children they had sacrificed everything to protect. "Stand down, all weapons," Azel Nara commanded, her ethereal form blazing with new understanding. "Send immediate orders to the entire fleet. We are not dealing with the enemy we thought we were fighting." The Synth Arch-Admiral's mechanical voice crackled with confusion. "Ambassador, our mission parameters remain unchanged. The architects have returned. Exactly as we feared." "No," Zelnara replied, sharing her psychic connection through the ship's communication system, so her entire crew could experience what she was feeling. "These aren't the architects we remember. They've become something different, something better. The humans haven't just inherited their power. They've inherited their wisdom." The change in perspective spread through the alien fleet like wildfire. Species that had lived in fear of the architects for 30,000 years suddenly found themselves experiencing human memories. A mother's love for her child, a teacher's patience with struggling students, a friend's loyalty through difficult times. They felt the full weight of human mortality, the precious nature of life that could be ended by accident or age. Through the psychic network, the aliens experienced what it meant to be vulnerable, to care for others who were weaker, to find strength in cooperation rather than domination. These were concepts that most of the ancient species had forgotten during their long reigns as galactic rulers. On Earth, Dr. Sarah Chen stood in a place that existed between dimensions, surrounded by the shimmering forms of the awakened architect consciousness. She could see the aliens' fear transforming into understanding, but she also sensed that fear alone wouldn't be enough to heal the wounds of the past. "They're afraid because they don't understand that power isn't the problem," she said to the ancient beings around her. "The problem is using power without considering the consequences for others. How do we show them that we've learned differently?" The lead architect presence, a being that had once reshaped entire solar systems with a thought, spoke with a voice that carried the weight of eons of regret. "By choosing to heal rather than to rule, the galaxy has been shaped by fear and dominance for too long. Our children can offer something different, the chance to grow and change together." Commander Okafor, still aboard the Pathfinder, found herself selected as humanity's representative for what would become the most important negotiation in galactic history. Through her connection to both her awakened crew and the collective human consciousness, she carried the voice of her entire species. "We didn't ask for this power," she told the assembled alien leadership as they gathered in a hastily arranged meeting that existed simultaneously in physical space and pure thought. "We're still learning what it means and how to use it responsibly. But we know one thing for certain. We don't want to repeat the mistakes of the past. Honor the past. The Confederation Council, meeting in emergency session for the second time in a month, struggled to process what they were hearing. The Luminol representative flickered with uncertainty as it spoke. Your offer of cooperation is unexpected. Our species have ruled the galaxy through strength and control. We do not understand your concept of shared power. Emma Martinez, now serving as the voice of human innocence and hope, projected her thoughts through the psychic network to every member of the council. But instead of words, she shared images. Children of all species, playing together. Scientists collaborating to solve problems no single race could handle alone. Artists creating beauty that combined the unique perspectives of different worlds. This is what we want, she said in her small voice that somehow carried across space to every listener. Not to be in charge, but to be friends. Not to rule others, but to help everyone become the best they can be. The transformation that followed was gradual but fundamental. The ancient species began to share their own suppressed memories of times when they had been young and vulnerable, when they had needed help from others to survive. The rigid hierarchy that had governed the galaxy for millennia started to dissolve, as beings who had held power for thousands of years remembered what it felt like to be small and uncertain. Marcus Rodriguez, his consciousness now distributed across multiple dimensions, worked with alien engineers to develop new technologies that combined human intuition with alien knowledge. Their first project was a device that could repair the reality damage caused by the existence engine. But it required cooperation from multiple species to function properly. The machine works on principles of consensus reality, he explained to the mixed teams of human and alien scientists. It can fix the broken areas of space-time, but only if everyone involved agrees on what the fix should look like. No one species can operate it alone. Dr. Tanaka led efforts to establish the first joint research facilities, where humans and aliens could study the nature of consciousness and reality together. Her enhanced understanding of quantum mechanics, combined with alien knowledge of mental manipulation, led to discoveries that revolutionized their understanding of existence itself. We're not just studying science, she told her mixed teams of researchers. We're learning to think together in ways that neither humans nor aliens could achieve alone. But the most important changes were happening on a more personal level. Ambassador Zelnara, her consciousness permanently expanded by her connection to human experience, became the first alien to choose to live part-time on Earth. She established her home in Emma Martinez's neighborhood, serving as both diplomat and friend to the families there. I never understood what I was missing during my immortal existence, she told Emma's parents over dinner one evening, her ethereal form gently glowing in their kitchen. You taught me that mortality isn't a weakness to be overcome, but a gift that makes every moment precious. The child Emma, now 10 years old and growing into her abilities with remarkable wisdom, had become something unique in galactic history, a bridge between species that allowed them to share thoughts and experiences as if they were part of the same family. The scary aliens aren't scary anymore, she told her parents. They were just lonely for a really long time, and they forgot how to be friends with people who were different from them. As the years passed, the galaxy transformed in ways that would have been impossible under the old system of rule by ancient powers. The rigid boundaries between species began to blur as they learned to cooperate and share knowledge freely. Young aliens came to study on Earth, while human children grew up learning from teachers who could show them the universe from perspectives developed over millions of years. The most remarkable change was the establishment of the consensus councils, governing bodies where decisions were made not by the strongest or oldest civilizations, but through collaborative agreement that took into account the needs and perspectives of all member species. Humans, with their architect heritage and hard-won wisdom, served not as rulers but as mediators and guides. Dr. Chen, now recognized as the foremost expert on reality manipulation in the known galaxy, worked to establish safeguards that would prevent the kind of power conflicts that had once nearly destroyed everything. But these weren't restrictions imposed by authority, they were agreements reached through understanding and mutual respect. The universe is like a song that all of us are singing together, she explained to a gathering of young beings from dozens of different species. Each of us contributes our unique voice, and the harmony we create together is more beautiful than any of us could make alone. Commander Okafor became the first human member of the Galactic Coordination Assembly, but she insisted that her role be temporary and rotating. Leadership should be about service, not privilege, she said. And service works best when it's shared among many people who bring different strengths to the task. The old warning beacons around the Sol system were replaced with welcome stations that served as meeting places for beings from across the galaxy. Where once there had been quarantine zones built from fear, there were now collaboration centers built from hope. Emma Martinez, now a young adult, worked to establish communication networks that connected not just different species, but different ways of thinking and experiencing reality. Her childhood game of mental connection had evolved into a system that allowed the sharing of knowledge, emotion, and perspective across vast differences in biology and culture. "We're all part of the same story," she said during the dedication of the first Interspecies Consciousness Center. "We're just telling it from different points of view, and that makes the story richer and more complete." The ancient architects, their consciousness now distributed among their human descendants and their alien friends, found the peace that had escaped them for so long. They had achieved their ultimate goal, not to preserve their power, but to transform it into something better. In the deepest archives of the new galactic civilization, researchers discovered the final message left by the original architects before they chose to fragment themselves across the cosmos. It read simply, "We became many so that our children would never face the loneliness of ultimate power. We chose mortality so that they might learn to value life. We scattered ourselves across the stars so that when they awakened, they would not awaken alone." The universe was no longer a collection of territories controlled by the strong, but a garden tended by all conscious beings working together. And in the heart of it all, on a small blue world that had once been forbidden to approach, children of dozens of different species played together in parks where the laws of physics bent gently to accommodate games of imagination and joy. The architect's greatest creation wasn't the vast structures they had built across space, or the technologies that could reshape matter with a thought. It was the simple lesson that true power comes not from the ability to control others, but from the wisdom to help them grow into the best versions of themselves. The galaxy had finally learned to sing in harmony, and the song was just beginning.